Gentlemen, we're stood outside the Peace Gallery on Melrose Avenue in lovely West Hollywood, California, and we're going to speak to a lady with a passion for fashion, a passion that's all about spreading peace through the artistry of making people look beautiful. Won't you come inside and shop around with us and find the new look, the look of peace, the look of the future, available to you today. When most people think of peace, they think of old men at the United Nations making proclamations above the heads of most of the men and women of the world. When most people think of galleries, they think of an equally stiff environment where people wearing suits and ties, but not lovely floral ones such as this, gaze at paintings of days of the past. However, we're sat here with the lovely Julia Gerard, the proprietor and designer of the Peace Gallery, a place which seeks to spread peace through fashion, much the way that OneLove are seeking to spread peace through music. Julia, it's so lovely of you to be with us this afternoon.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Now, Julia, you've had a long and wonderful career as a fashion designer. What was it that made you depart the world of fashion for the sake of art and move into the world of fashion for the sake of spreading peace through art?
As a matter of fact, it'll be tomorrow, September 11th, except the year was 2001. Yeah, it had such an incredibly horrific, deep impact on me that I thought, in a way, it accelerated my purpose in life, because I have a very huge humanitarian streak in me that was very unfulfilled doing fashion, just fashion. And charity sometimes can be very shallow too, because of all the parties and all the things that are involved. I know people like to have fun when they do things, and at the same time, it brought my purpose, my internal humanitarian purpose, together with what I love to do as an artist.
And so when you saw those events of the 11th of September of 2001, was there something inside of you that said there needs to be a greater push for peace if something like this is possible?
It was more along the lines of we should have never abandoned the peace sign, because I'm a byproduct of the 60s and a product of the 60s. And I feel that we were somehow rather embarrassed, or I'm not quite sure what the words are right now, but we were sort of in some form thwarted out of there. And that should have never, ever, ever happened. And the only person that never was thwarted out of that was Ringo Starr, and I truly, truly admire him for that. Because I remember when bell bottoms came back in, I think it was like somewhere in the 90s or something, and one of my customers says, "You're not going to do those awful bell bottoms, are you?" And I just stood there and I thought to myself, I don't, people, and all of a sudden, they just think in terms of fashion. They don't think in terms of messages that travel with a message of peace, and you can still look beautiful. And it has nothing to do with it. It's visual art that reminds you to be a certain way.
So does a piece of art's validity necessarily have to be predicated on its ability to express a message of conscience?
Again, I really feel that art is extremely personal, and there's no way possible to predict what any one person will see in that art form, ever, ever, ever. And I just think it's all just beautiful. And I'm a linguist first and foremost. It's a language, and the way people interpret languages, not the way they learn them, but the way they interpret them, is entirely up to them. You could take all the art classes in the world, but then when you see a piece of art, it's going to speak a language to you.
Insofar as traditional languages, semantics as it were, is incomplete insofar as it can express an idea or a concept, a feeling, do you think art, in your case fashion, is sometimes a more direct way of expressing something than even 1,000 words?
It's beyond that, simply due to the fact that it is our second skin. And anything you put on yourself is going to affect you in so many different ways, in so many levels, that it's impossible to predict.
What do you have to say to the people out there who are wearing clothes that they're uncomfortable with? Is it as if they're uncomfortable in their own skin?
I think that they are probably trying too hard, usually, and they're just not... they have ways to... I guess, what is the word? They just don't know themselves.
And so you think that part of the process of finding your distinct fashion is about self-discovery more than it's about the discovery of someone else's artwork, even.
I'll put it a different way, in my own terms. I never sell anybody anything that I don't see them being animated in the mirror. If they're not animated by wearing it, if they're not all of a sudden themselves, even if I don't know them, I'll know when they're being themselves in that garment.
And so it's important to look at the person more than just what they're wearing.
The character comes through the clothing, and if it doesn't, then the clothes wear the person, and I don't enjoy sending that out the door.
Now, one of your latest projects has been being the designer extraordinaire for One Love, the campaign to spread peace through another great art form that's close to my heart, music. How do you think that spreading peace through fashion, your entree, relates to spreading peace through music, as One Love are doing?
Well, fashion and music are completely enmeshed. They're not even intertwined, they are enmeshed. And so that it's just a natural progression.
And so you think then, like, I cannot listen to a song by any given band without picturing the album cover, picturing the people, their faces, their body language, their fashion. I mean, what musicians do you think have some of the fashion that's inspired you the most?
Whoa,
I'm sure there's quite a... Well,
no, it's endless. Since I'm a byproduct of the 60s, it's endless.
Yeah. You mentioned Ringo Starr was someone who sort of never turned his back on the fashion of peace. When peace sort of fell out of fashion, which seems to me a bit of an oxymoron. Peace should be a goal perpetually strived towards. But
Absolutely.
You think Ringo was someone who never let the torch be doused?
Never.
So have you met Ringo? Or?
Oh yeah, he's a very good customer of the Peace Gallery.
Oh, I'm sure he'd fit right in.
Do with peace.
Now, looking at a lot of your work, what's so striking to me is that when most people think of peace fashion, they might tend to think things are overly flowery, overly frilly, and very grassroots. And there are things that are very grassroots, but at the same time, what I love is you've been able to take this pure message of peace and not let it be constrained. There are things that are very glamorous, there are things that are very chic, and there are things that are sort of very dark and metallic with a very hip, sort of gritty rock and roll look. Is that something that you've consciously done?
No, all the peace signs that you see behind us right here, and they were done by a man named Sirius Trixon. He and I met about 5 years ago, and he saw that I was wearing all these peace signs all over me, my clothing and everything, because I lost my mind during September 11th. I started to get really ugly, that evening I made those 2 giant wreaths that are next door. And I also started putting the peace signs on my clothes because of the things I was thinking. And I'm a Kundalini yoga yogi, and I was extremely upset in my state of mind. So I was watching myself become literally regressing, regressing, and it was just very disturbing to me. And I'm very visual, so I started sewing peace signs on everything that I personally was wearing. And when he and I met, he has never drawn anything his entire life, and in 2 nights, where I live, I have a studio downstairs, and I have a giant cutting table. In 2 nights, he covered the entire cutting table with peace signs that nobody's ever seen before.
Wow.
And he was just doodling around. He completely channeled it. This man's a musician. He has nothing to do with drawing. He never drew anything.
But he was inspired by...
Somehow or other, yes. Yeah.
And now, so you mentioned your spirituality with respect to yoga. Looking at your work, there's a lot of symbols from many different branches of religion, of spirituality. They're Hindu symbols, symbols of Christianity, Judaism. How do you relate your work to spirituality, and how does it speak to your own spirituality?
I'm just here to visually peacify anything and everything I can get my little grubby hands on, because I have seen people walk into the Peace Gallery and completely transform, who had absolutely no desire to have anything of peace in their wardrobe. They were almost kind of almost violently repelled by it. And then within 10 minutes of standing around here, something would change in them. So I have no idea. Like I said, I have a humanitarian streak, and it's internal, it's not external.
One love, one heart, let's get together and feel alright.
Toast to one love.